You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, part two worked that time, so we're just going to
blew the good surprise on you.
Yes. So little bit of technical difficulty starting off tonight, but we are here, we're live, we're ready to go. I am Derek, and I am joined as always by your co-hosts Kevin and Alex for another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good, man. It's officially draft season, right? Like, we are finishing up our team breakdowns tonight. But really it is next week, excuse me. Sorry, next week. We got two more after this. But it's officially draft season, right? Like, rankings are coming out. You're starting to see some different strategies.
Alex,
wait, it wasn't me this time?
It's not just you this time. Like, talk about
Hallelujah.
frozen in time too. Like, he's
so I normally that happens on my end where the internet just seizes up and I just go along with it and wait for my internet to catch up. And I thought that was the case today, but I saw your head moving. So Kevin has the bug this week.
wow,
as he was saying,
that's a hard freeze too.
Yeah, that is a hard freeze. As he was saying, it is draft season. It's time to see some of those strategies play out, see where people are valuing people right now. It's weird. We have actual football this week. Like, I know it's, the Hall of Fame game and nobody's actually really playing in it. I think I saw today that Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne are not playing in the Hall of Fame game, which is to be expected. It's a bonus preseason game. You don't need to roll those guys out there, risk any injuries, because as we have seen already, injuries happen, and they happen in practice. They'll happen in those preseason games. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate part of this game, but we've already seen it. And then the other big news that we are obviously all excited about is a new member to the Broncos ownership group. Did you happen to catch that one today, Derek?
No, I was very, very on the busy side and did not manage to get much other than the fact that you can I did see some news come through that you can tamper with the NFL. You can do all sorts of other things in a personal conduct type of things, but the point is, just don't gamble on it.
Do not gamble. Yeah, do not gamble on the NFL. That's obviously the big no-no, apparently. Don't gamble with a partnering gambling website on a game that you are not playing in. That's the lesson, right?
It's okay to have multiple forms of tampering, because you're only, as an owner who's a billionaire,
right?
You only get fined like $1.5 million.
Yeah. Have to stay away from the team for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
All that
stuff.
You can't be around the team for till the middle of October. Oh darn, you're in the middle of Miami. What are you going to do?
Yeah, shame that. But back to the Broncos, one of the new partners in the ownership group of the Broncos, Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time F1 World Champion of the Year, is joining the Walton Penner family as the ownership group of the Denver Broncos. So just get some winners in there. Although this year, if you've been following F1, has not been Lewis's best. But that is exciting. That's fun. It's, something to talk about. It's a lot better news that came out of Denver today than the other news that came out of Denver today. So that other news, of course, Tim Patrick seems to have suffered an ACL tear, and he will be done for the season, is the last that I saw.
Yeah, I saw that along with Crockett.
That is unfortunate. That's a huge loss. So unfortunately, that's part of this game. But injuries happen, and the best teams overcome those, right? That's kind of the idea. It's kind of the idea that you put together with your fantasy roster. You try to be able to absorb injuries like that and make your way to a championship. So should be fun.
Yeah, Absolutely. So, it was interesting, right? I was going through my projections and all of that, and one of my hottest takes that I had out there was that Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick were going to finish within about 7 points of each other in half-point PPR scoring, which for everybody out there, that one was not a consensus view at all. Certainly. So, a little disappointed that I can't see that one play out there on that one, but do wish both Crockett and Patrick a speedy recovery and hope to see them back there in some Bronco orange here soon. So, but Alex, any other thoughts here before we start rocking and rolling into some team breakdowns? Kevin is the Wi-Fi.
Speaking of technical difficulties, yeah.
Yes, it has been a comedy of technical difficulties, I guess, tonight.
Now let's get into our team. Kevin will join in with his fantastic insight.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go ahead and start it off. We're going to go over to Kansas City. The Chiefs, 12-5 last year, 61% pass, 39% run. They're ranked 4th in total points, 3rd in total yards for head coach Andy Reid, offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. And we're going to head over to the running back room where we always start. Clyde Edwards-Helaire finished running back 41 last year, 119 rush attempts, 517 yards, 4 touchdowns, 19 receptions on 23 targets, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
So, if it happens one year, it is a welcome back, Kevin. We're just getting into Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Sorry,
if that's all good. Just happy it wasn't me for once. As we start to see and we get more information on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he was obviously the hot commodity coming out of LSU there. That the COVID year, right, where basically LSU's entire national championship team got drafted. He played in 13 games his rookie season. And then, you don't know what to expect. They didn't really have a good camp, or an extended camp. The games were weird because there were no fans in the stands. There's just a lot. There was a lot going into it. But you figured he was going to the Chiefs. The Chiefs were going to be, high-powered, high-tempo offense. And they were. And, he played in 13 games and was able to grab, 4 touchdowns on the ground his rookie year and 1 through the air. So he was good for 5 touchdowns. And then last year, where I think a lot of people were hoping, okay, even though he played in only 13 games, there is something to build on that. Well, then the injury bug caught up with him again, and he was only able to play in 10 games. And so now we're starting to see, I think if it happens once, it might be an anomaly. It happens twice, it's probably a pattern. So now you have to understand that Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably isn't going to play in 17 games, probably isn't going to be available for a decent portion of the season. So, you could still probably safely expect 4 touchdowns on the ground. That's what he's done each of the first 2 years. Probably expect a couple touchdowns through the air, 1 or 2. I know there's some key departures on the Chiefs this year that might open some things up, namely Tyreek getting out of town. And that might open some things up for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But, I think what we're starting to see is what you get. So you take your initial observation of he is a great running back from a powerhouse SEC program that just ran through everybody in college football, gets to the Chiefs where he was able to kind of work his way in, had a couple really good, statement games right off the bat there, but then kind of settled into that role of just, not really the game changer I think that we were hoping that he would be. And now you have to understand you're not going to have him for an entire season. So I still think that there's value there, but you need to be able, if you're going to draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you need to make sure that you have other options, because odds are you're not going to be able to have him for an entire season. So make sure that you protect yourself. Maybe you have to grab a running back, a second or third if you're going to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because if I'm not mistaken, he's probably still going in the first
27th overall running, or 27th running back off the board.
27th running back off the board. Well, then I give people a lot more credit because that's
61st overall.
That's probably about where he should go. Because he to me is not RB1 friendly. Like he has potential to be RB1, but I don't think he is. I mean, I would see him finishing in that RB2. And now all that could change with how the Chiefs use him this year. You know, with Tyreek gone, like there could be some opportunity for him. But again, I just don't think that he's certainly not an RB1. And he might even really be a fringe RB2.
So I like where CEH is going, but I don't like who he's going around, if that makes sense. So based off of how I'm drafting, right? Like he is in the middle of really, really good wide receiver talent. And so I don't have many shares of CEH because I am looking at Chris Godwin, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney. All those guys are right there in that area. Just before that group, we're looking at Dallas Goedert, if you're looking at tight end. Cortland Sutton's in that area. Brandon Cooks is in that area. A.J. Dillon is the running back going right in front of CEH. And then Damian Harris is the running back going right after CEH. So, Alex, I do subscribe with what you're kind of hinting towards, right? That because Tyreek is gone, I don't know that this offense is going to be as dynamic. We've seen them play that cover 2 shell and force the check down a little bit more. Well, part of the way you get teams out of that cover 2 shell is you're able to pound the rock up the middle, and you have to be able to get into that second level. So they're dropping that safety into the box and getting out of that defense. So Andy Reid is absolutely an offensive genius and is able to come up with this game plan, but I'm going to let him come up with that game plan while Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on someone else's roster. He's a good running back. He's a good third running back on your team. So don't get me wrong. If this is your draft strategy and this is where you're going for your guy, I'm okay with that. It just doesn't fit in with my draft strategies. I would rather have any one of the wide receivers that I listed off over CEH this season. I love Cortland Sutton this season. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown as a second or third wide receiver. Darnell Mooney is going to be a target fiend. So if you're in a PPR league, I think Darnell Mooney is a guy that you should absolutely be going after because he's kind of the only show in Chicago right now. Allen Robinson, we were just talking about him last week and how much I like Allen Robinson. I think that Rams offense is going to be able to support either 2 top 12 wide receivers, but at least 2 top 15 wide receivers with the way that passing attack works. I'm perfectly comfortable with doing that. So for all of those reasons, I'm not drafting a whole lot of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If I want a piece of the Chiefs offense, I am looking at a different direction this season besides CEH.
Yeah. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? We already said it. Coming off the board, 61st overall, the 27th running back off the board. I don't know that he lives up to that ADP. I really don't. I think he's going to finish just inside, the very tail end of RB3 territory this year. Really, I think he's probably going to be, 34, 35, 36, kind of somewhere in that range as far as his RB finish on the season. And so if you're taking him, you're overpaying at that point as far as, ADP and draft capital would be concerned. But Kevin, for all the same points that you just mentioned there, and the way that I typically construct a roster and construct a team, there's about zero chance that CEH is going to end up on my roster on this one, simply from the standpoint that at that, when it comes around into the 5th to 6th round type of thing, I'm usually having to add, my, in some cases, my first wide receiver, but certainly my second, potentially even my third wide receiver is going on there as well, or going with the tight end there. Guys like, Dalton Schultz was another guy going kind of in that similar draft capital and draft range there as well. Single QB leagues might be looking at like a Jalen Hurts in that similar type of draft capital there. So there's a lot of other guys that I would rather go with than CEH. And I think that this year it is going to be a little bit of an overpay if you draft him at RB27. Let's go ahead and head on into the next guy in the running back room. Ronald Jones II, coming over from Tampa Bay this offseason. Was running back 59 last year, 101 rush attempts, 428 yards, 4 touchdowns, 10 receptions, 13 targets, 64 yards, 0 touchdowns. Thoughts on Ronald Jones?
So Rojo's a guy I'm keeping an eye on, right? Like if there's obviously the injury history, like Alex mentioned with CEH, on top of the fact you're getting such a deep discount, if you're just looking for a little bit of versatility and you're looking for a piece of that Chiefs offense and maybe you don't want to pay up for tight end, okay, you don't trust the fact that JuJu is going to be the true number one guy, and maybe you just don't love where Hardman and MVS are going, right? Like whatever the reason. Rojo's a guy I'm at least keeping an eye on, right? Taking a late round flyer on Rojo, adding some running back depth. Like he catches the ball decently out of the backfield, not well, but decently out of the backfield. I think that this offense is probably going to be a little bit more friendly to him than what it was in Tampa Bay. The biggest thing with Rojo is you got to hold on to the ball. You got to limit your turnovers, right? Because Andy Reid, just like any other head coach, doesn't like turnovers, and it's a quick way to get in his doghouse. But he does still have that breakaway speed. Like he is still lightning quick. If he gets in past that first level and can make it a foot race, it is a different way for the Chiefs to be dynamic in a way that maybe they haven't shown as much of in the past few years, right? All their dynamic plays have truly come out of the passing game, unless it's real ground and pound late in the fourth quarter because they got a big lead and you just wear the defense down and spring one. Rojo can do that in the second quarter, right? Like he doesn't need the defense to be completely worn down. It's just a matter of if he's going to get enough opportunities. So I'm keeping a real close eye on Chiefs camp with Rojo, because if it's looking like he's going to see, his fair share, and I say that by, the 35 to 40% of the carries, right? Because you figure it's not going to be true 50-50 or whatever. But if you can see 35 to 40% of the carries, sprinkle in, 2-3 targets each game, possibly something like that, I think you have the ability to gain some value off of where you're drafting Rojo. So contrary to everything I just said about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rojo's a guy that I do actually have a star next to, and I'm keeping a beat on him, right? I want to know what the latest information on him is, because if I'm liking what I'm seeing, he's a guy late round that's worth taking the dart throw on that could pay big dividends on your roster as you get into the season.
Yeah, that's exactly how I view him too. Is that late round guy that, look, if CEH goes down, and history tells us he will, if he goes down for a couple of weeks, like Rojo's next guy up, right? So that's a discount from where you're taking CEH to Rojo, and essentially, for those couple of weeks, he's going to be getting CEH usage. But that's not going to happen, over the course of the season. So to me, yeah, Rojo is a guy that is a deep discount, a guy that you draft and stash. If you've got a deep bench, you draft and stash, wait for CEH to get hurt, and then all of a sudden you've got yourself a starting running back that you didn't have to pay a starting running back premium for in the draft. So I think that's the strategy with Rojo, is that you bide your time with him. And you figure out, you get him on your roster, but late and at the right price. But you get him on your roster and you wait until, inevitably, and CEH misses a couple games, and now you've got starting running back value for a guy that you didn't have to spend starting running back capital on.
I like it. Y'all ready for a little bit of a spicy take here? Here's some spice coming at you.
Oh, let's hear it.
All right. Ronald Jones will have the most carries on the Kansas City Chiefs this season, but he will not have the most fantasy points out of the running back position for the Kansas City Chiefs. So predicting that Rojo will ultimately take the bulk of the carries coming out of there. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire will manage to overtake him and certainly half-point PPR scoring with what the passing work and what some of that's going to be on that one. So that being said, I don't think that I've got Ronald Jones breaking 200 carries this year. I've got him somewhere kind of in that 160, total attempts type of thing. So he'll put up some decent value for you, especially where you're taking him 41st overall, 41st running back, 110th overall, which is going to put him, certainly out there, for where you can pick him up and certainly find some value for him on that one. And I think that where he's coming off the board at and where he returns is actually probably pretty fair value, but he will certainly probably splash once or twice throughout the season and give you a good week or two here. But certainly do kind of like the value that you can pick him up with, and some of the other guys kind of going around him. Alexander Madison, if I've got Dalvin Cook, then I'm going that route. But running backs in that range and draft capital wise, I do like the value that you can get there. Any other thoughts on the running back room here? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to the wide receivers. JuJu Smith-Schuster finished wide receiver 137th last year, 15 receptions, 28 targets, 129 yards, 0 touchdowns, 4.29% target share out there in Pittsburgh, coming over during the off season and a shortened injury season there as well. Thoughts on JuJu Smith-Schuster?
So Juju's a guy that at the very beginning, right, he shot up in early draft boards when he signed with Kansas City, has since kind of come back down to life at least a little bit. Lately I've been taking a couple shares of JuJu here and there, just because at the beginning I was not paying that high draft price. And my rationale is this: at the beginning, I thought it was terrible, and I believe my original hot take was he'd finish outside the top 40. I believe is what it was, right? And I think I'm ready to walk that back a little bit, if everyone will let me. Only because the targets for Tyreek have to go somewhere. Like, I don't see the Chiefs throwing the ball a whole lot less just because Tyreek isn't there, and they do have to go somewhere. JuJu has the ability similar to Tyreek in his catch and run. He doesn't catch the deep ball as well as Tyreek did, so I think you kind of lose some of that, and maybe you're filling in with a Mecole Hardman or an MVS guy who's taking some more of those deep shots that Tyreek took. But outside the numbers, in that 8 to 15 yard area, right? You have Kelsey dominating the middle, but you still need that receiver outside. And JuJu can do that. He can take those slants. He can take those bubble screens and be productive with them. So at the moment, I'm having an easier time taking JuJu. That being said, my wide receiver room does have to look right for me to do it. Like, I can't trust JuJu to carry my wide receiver room, and I'm really not all that confident with him as my second wide receiver, but I really do like him as a flex or as my third. But the draft board doesn't always fall that way, right? Like, you have to be really confident and understand where things are going. So I might be still fading him more than a lot of people are, but I just don't find the Chiefs as must-have as I found them in years past, since Tyreek is gone and kind of blows up the look of this team offensively a little bit outside of Travis Kelce.
So, I mean, really what this boils down to is, can JuJu shoulder the load by himself? Which I don't think he's going to have to, right? Obviously, the Chiefs have, plenty of options. And I think that Pat Mahomes with, another year is just going to do, I think Pat Mahomes has more of an affinity to make the right play than to force the play as he gets more mature in his NFL career. So does JuJu, does he have enough to be considered a wide receiver one on that roster, the top target for Patrick Mahomes. Sorry. I don't think he does. And with where he's being taken right now, I think that's right. I think that's right about where, he might get into wide receiver 2 territory, but I think with where Patrick Mahomes is going to have to go with the ball, and that, the Chiefs this is actually one of the years with all of the changes that the Chiefs have made over the offseason, like they're a lot harder to dissect and figure out than they were certainly the previous 2 years, where we kind of had an idea of what that offense was going to look like. I don't know that, JuJu fills the role of what Tyreek does. I don't think anybody can fill the role of what Tyreek did. So I'm having a tough time with JuJu. And I think because of that, I would be out on JuJu. And I think I would rather go with somebody who's going around him. There's a couple guys around him that I think I'd be a little bit more comfortable with in terms of the wide receiver where they're going, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown or Michael Thomas is going right there, which is still a little scary, but I think I'd rather go those routes than, and Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, I was just going off of one ADP site there, but I think I'd rather have those guys than I would JuJu.
Yeah, the ADP I'm looking at has Michael Thomas 27th off the board, Amon-Ra 28th, JuJu 33rd. So they're kind of in that neighborhood with each other. I think there's certainly a tier break in between them.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So very much what you guys just said. I'm kind of right there with you, right? Our JuJu Smith-Schuster coming off the board, the 33rd wide receiver, 81st, 82nd overall is kind of the ADP I'm looking at. So that puts him as a 7th round, kind of, mid to back 7th round pick there. And there are guys going later than him as a wide receiver that I think I would rather have than JuJu Smith-Schuster. I look at guys like Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman. I think I would rather take the flyer on one of those guys because I think the ceiling is ultimately higher than what we'll see with JuJu Smith-Schuster. This was one of the things that I've been saying for a few years out there as well, is that with JuJu Smith-Schuster, he is an exceptional wide receiver number 2 for your team, right? Like, we haven't seen him carry the load that as the alpha wide receiver on an organization and on his team. Yes, I'm well aware that he had a massive 1,400-yard season in his sophomore year, but he was playing opposite of Antonio Brown, who was really taking the coverage off of him, taking things like that. Where JuJu Smith-Schuster tends to excel is out of the slot on this one, which at that point, if he's coming out of the slot, you got Travis Kelce right there as well. You've now got them kind of in that same area of the field. And we haven't seen JuJu necessarily excel much on the outside. And I think where you're going to see Kansas City play this thing is you're going to have Mecole Hardman on one side and MVS on the other side, shooting up and really trying to take the top off the defense to keep things honest there. So it tries to open things up a little bit more for JuJu and Travis Kelce underneath there. But that being the case, I've got Travis Kelce by a mile out targeting anybody else on this roster. And JuJu is a very distant second. Really only see JuJu in that kind of 110 to 120 total targets this year. So I'm going to be out on JuJu just right now off of where his ADP is. But if he falls a little bit more before draft time, I may very well take a flyer there just because of the offense that he's on. All right, Mecole Hardman finished wide receiver 59 last year, 51 receptions, 72 targets, 590 yards, 2 touchdowns, 13.05% of the target share. Thoughts on Mecole Hardman?
I like him as a 10th round in best ball. We've been waiting for this kid to break out. They drafted him when Tyreek was having the legal issues. If you guys remember, like in the scuttlebutt, right? The Chiefs never came out and said this necessarily, but the scuttlebutt around our industry was, he could replace Tyreek. Like, he could do a lot of those things. He is a quick twitch guy. He doesn't run routes as cleanly as Tyreek Hill does. That's why you haven't seen him be on the field a whole lot. He's a dynamic kick and punt returner still. Obviously, he's good to get behind the defense a couple times a year, so you want to capitalize on that, which is why I like him for best ball most of all. Would I take a flyer on him as a late round wide receiver to kind of fill out my team? Yeah, possibly. You take some upside, right? You take a little bit of risk. You take the gamble. If you don't like it, then you drop him and you pick up, maybe a rookie who you think is going to develop in the back half of the year or something like that. But I don't know that I'm targeting Mecole Hardman at all. I have more interest in JuJu than I do Mecole Hardman, and I am taking more shares of MVS, and they're going basically back-to-back in drafts. So we'll talk about that here in a second. I'm taking more shares of MVS than I am of Hardman as well. So I don't like saying it because he's a Georgia boy, right? Like he's not filling it for me on my fantasy teams.
It's funny because you said I was going to talk about the next guy the same way that you kind of talked about Mecole Hardman here. Is that like what a phenomenal best ball player that they're going to be. Like they're going to be dry weeks, but there are going to be weeks where each of these guys, I think, it could be, the same game. It could be, each of them takes a week off and, one has a big week and one has the other. But to me, I think it will be feast or famine with Mecole Hardman and with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But to me, these are best ball plays, and it's buyer beware if you put them on your week in, week out, need to get points roster.
Yeah, the only right now Mecole Hardman going late in drafts there, but even that being the case, I don't know that I necessarily want to roster him. He's coming off the board as the 59th wide receiver, 161st pick. And at that point, I think I'll probably just let him sit out there and stay. Mecole Hardman is a guy that we have yet to see take that step forward when he's given the opportunity to try and be the Chiefs' number one guy there. And I don't know that this is the year that happens either. So Mecole Hardman, I think that I've got him finishing outside and behind that ADP there as well. I think that with the Kansas City Chiefs offense, you're going to very much have a nebulous type of wide receiver position where you're just going to see Patrick Mahomes take the best option and who's open and really just kind of spread the ball around when it's all said and done. I don't know that you're going to see much in the way of a guy really get featured outside of Travis Kelce in this one. So let's go ahead and head on into Marquez Valdes-Scantling. There he is. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, wide receiver 80 last year, 26 receptions, 55 targets, 430 yards, 3 touchdowns, 9.67% of the target share. Thoughts on Marquez Valdes-Scantling?
So for the longest time, I've really thought MVS would be the wide receiver who leads in targets for the Chiefs. I still think it's going to be a little bit closer than people think. MVS is a guy that I'm out of the Chiefs receivers. He's the guy I probably have the most of here at the moment, just because I think his working with Aaron Rodgers probably translates the best over to him working with Patrick Mahomes as opposed to JuJu working with Big Ben. So we're definitely going to see how that works out. But he's a deep play guy, another great best ball asset to have for those peak weeks where he goes 3 for 127 and 2 touchdowns, right? Like you can just see that happening at least 1 week this season. So I am kind of targeting for that. I will take a flyer on him late in drafts if it falls the right way. I'm not going to force the issue to get him on my roster, but I would prefer him slightly over Mecole Hardman as far as a Chiefs pass catcher late in drafts.
Yeah, I see MVS as a terrific best ball player, and same, Kevin. I just think you take the late flyer, but just temper your expectations and understand that it's tough. It's going to be really tough because he is going to have one of those weeks. Like you can pretty much just put it down, write it in pen, he is going to have one of those weeks where it is a bonkers week in terms of touchdowns and receptions. But I don't know that I'm going to have the confidence to have him in my lineup, each and every week to take that chance that it happens. So that's the risk you run with MVS. Terrific best ball player, but beyond that, that's a lot of risk that you take putting him in your lineup on the hope that he has that 1 week where he goes crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, MVS coming off the board is the 52nd wide receiver, 142nd overall. So you're talking a 12th round pick there. So some of that risk kind of baked in there. And MVS, best ball wise, is an absolute monster to have. He's not necessarily going to be a weekly performer for you, but in the best ball format, you don't have to guess when he's going to explode and finish wide receiver 5 for you on the week. And so love him for that format, but right there in the same vein you guys are when you're talking redraft style. Just nope, don't want him for season long on that one. Too much trying to predict crazy things there. We don't have a slide made up for it, but we'll go ahead and address Skye Moore here. Any thoughts on Skye Moore?
Him, yeah, I want him to do well. Sorry, let me backtrack this a little bit. I think Skye Moore has the potential to kind of be a touchdown vulture here this season. I don't know that I see him with a ton of receptions or even with a ton of yardage. But I do think the Chiefs are going to have special packages in for him and allow his athleticism and his ability to cut and route run extremely well show, especially inside the red zone. So is he one of those guys who possibly kind of blooms late, kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown did last year? Yes, that's entirely possible. Is he a guy that I am investing a whole lot of capital in? No, I just have a hard time trusting rookie wide receivers. And we go through this every single season. And every single season, I feel like one or two of these guys kind of surprise us a little bit. And I'm okay if he's one of those surprises. But I'm not investing in that, right? Especially in redraft leagues, I'm not buying all that. I want you to show me before I waste or take up one of these valuable roster spots. In Dynasty, heck yeah, I'm grabbing them up. If I'm drafting at the tail end of the first round and I need receiver help, Skye Moore is absolutely a guy I'm looking at. He right there with Watson and, for me, George Pickens, right? We've talked about him as well. So I don't have any issue in Dynasty formats taking Skye. I understand the allure of playing with Patrick Mahomes and why you think that could work. I'm perfectly fine with that. I need him to show me in redraft leagues before I'm signing off on it. So I am fading him in redraft.
It's funny because, JuJu and MVS, they have a couple of weeks on Skye Moore when it comes to learning the playbook and, getting to know Patrick Mahomes. I mean, realistically, right? Yeah, they have NFL experience and that experience is invaluable. But when it comes to being a member of the Kansas City Chiefs and working with Patrick Mahomes, those two guys have just a couple of weeks. So it's not outrageous to think that Skye Moore, maybe something clicks there. Maybe he figures it out. He is coming from, the MAC, there at Western Michigan. So he wasn't exactly playing against, the greatest of defenses for his conference slate. But it's not outrageous to think that he could make an impact. I don't think it's week 1, but to Kevin's point, could he, figure it out? Will the light turn on, sooner rather than later? I just don't know when that's going to be. So yes, Dynasty, he's very, very alluring because you've got him with Patrick Mahomes for at least 4 years, hopefully. But for a redraft for this year, I don't know. I think that's another thing where you kind of keep tabs on the waiver wire and see, because I don't know that he'll be drafted in most leagues. He might, just because he plays for the Chiefs, but he might also find himself back on the waiver wire after week 1 when people start scrambling and realizing that he may not be, the instant gratification that you're looking for come week 1. So I think it's a long con with Skye Moore. So if you're patient, I think it'll pay off. But if you're looking for instant, it probably won't be the case.
I mean, Skye Moore coming off the board, wide receiver 54 overall, wide receiver 54, 151st overall. So you're talking a 13th round pick. And if you told me I had to pick one of these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers between MVS, Mecole Hardman, and Skye Moore, all kind of guys going in that similar draft range, I'm going to take Skye Moore on that one. I'm going to take the potential on the unknown there. Kevin set it up that we want them to go out and show us something. Absolutely, we do. But we've seen what MVS does. We've seen what Mecole Hardman does. And if I was forced to take a Kansas City wide receiver in that kind of draft capital range, Skye Moore would be the guy that would do it for potential second half type of thing. That's the problem that you really have here with these wide receivers outside of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Who had both, kind of historic rookie years, coming through and really change the game on that one a little bit. Rookie wide receivers really don't start to pop until week 9, week 10 of the season, and you start really kind of see them coming around there. So short of it being, one of those, I'm just out, and I'm gonna pass on that one. But I think he's probably has the most upside between those guys there, as far as season-long value. Let's go ahead and head over to the tight ends. Travis Kelce, tight end number 2, 88 receptions, 129 targets, 1,091 yards, 8 touchdowns, 21.07% of the target share. Thoughts on Travis Kelce?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know that we can say anything about Kelce that hasn't already been said, right? We expect him to dominate the targets. We expect him to finish tight end 1, 2, maybe 3 on a down year. So if you're drafting him, especially in a tight end premium league, absolutely, you want to grab Travis Kelce. I have no problem if you're going after one of those premier tight ends and you think Kelsey's your guy this season, I have no problem with you taking him first or third, just depending on what you feel about Andrews and Pitts, right? Like it's kind of those 3 up top. Excuse me, and then you're messing with Kittle and Waller. So I don't have anything else to add. Like he is the premier tight end in the league right now.
I mean, his role is going to be a little bit more expanded because of the vacated targets to Tyreek. So I think he even gets even more looks his way. I think there was, last year was a down year by his standards because the year before he just, shattered all expectations really. And was just, I don't know that he shattered expectations, but he definitely exceeded, I think, what anybody's wildest expectations of a tight end would be. So I think with Travis Kelce, it is draft and move on because he's going to be the tight end. I have a hard time, like Kevin said, I have a hard time seeing him finish outside the top 3. And realistically, I don't think he finishes anywhere close to being outside the top 5. Like he might finish top 5 if some of these other guys just have bonkers years. But it's going to take a bonkers year to kind of unseat him from that top 3, which it'll be a bonkers year for those guys. And it'll just be another year for Travis Kelce.
Yeah. Travis Kelce, really good at football. So there's some gripping analysis there for you there. But Travis Kelce this year, I have him finishing as the tight end number 1 overall. Mark Andrews very close behind, and then a big tier break between before you get to Darren Waller on that one. So Travis Kelce, if you are a fan of going the 0 RB or really getting that positional advantage at the tight end role, Travis Kelce comes at a discount this year compared to what he was going at last year. Last year you were having to spend a 7th, 8th overall pick for it. You can now get him kind of at that 202 type of draft position there, which I think is very, very good value for you on that one. So,
one of my favorite things to do, and I've jumped in a couple leagues like this where they're it's a tight end premium and you have to start 2.
Yep.
Being at the back end of the first round is a freaking gold mine, because at the top end of the draft, they still go running back heavy, even quarterback, because a lot of these 2 tight end leagues are also super flex. So the back end of the first round, it is a gold mine because you're able to pick up 2 of those top 5. I mean, however that works out, you're able to pick up 2 of the top 5 if you're in the, picking anywhere from 9 to 12, basically in that range. And you set yourself apart from everyone else in the league by such a ridiculous amount that it is almost impossible for me to advise anyone to do something different. So again, formats, I'm sure we'll touch on this as we get closer into the season and start doing the different types of drafts and strategies and all that sort of stuff. But just while we're talking about Kelsey specifically, if you're in any type of tight end premium or 2 tight end type league and you're drafting at the back end of the first round, my strong advice is get the tight ends and then worry about everything else after the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. I like it. Let's go ahead and head on over to the quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes finished QB number 4 last year, 436 completions, 658 attempts, 66.7% completion percentage, 4,558 yards, 35 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 57 rush attempts for 327 on the ground and 2 tutties on the ground. Thoughts on Patrick Mahomes?
I think this is pretty much what to expect, right? Like, he's going to finish somewhere in that neighborhood of 1 through 5. And there is a positional break after that, right? Like, you have Josh Allen, you have Justin Herbert, you have Patrick Mahomes. Like, those guys probably have the safest floors out of anybody. And then it's up for debate, right? Like, you can look at a Kyler, you can look at Lamar Jackson because of the rushing upside. You can look a couple different ways, but you know what you're getting in Patrick Mahomes, and you can trust that, right? You're getting somewhere between 33 and 38 touchdowns consistently. Like, that's not a problem. 43 to 4,600 yards comfortably. He has all these weapons. They're going to throw the ball. Like, Andy Reid doesn't love to run the ball, so they're going to chuck it around the yard. If he's your guy, go get your guy. Like, there's no true distinction and or argument that I think truly sways Herbert, Allen, and Mahomes apart, other than you could argue that Patrick Mahomes has never finished as QB1. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the one thing Josh Allen truly has over him, right? Like, he's never finished QB1. Now, not that he can't, right? The talent's there, out of this world talent. But, I mean, if you're looking to throw stones, that's the one stone you have.
I will say there is a little concern for me this year because of the lack of continuity in his receiver room. But I think he's able to overcome that. Like, that's how good of a player he is. He's able to overcome the question marks that we all had surrounding the guys, in the receiving room. And obviously he's got, compatibility and comfortability with Travis Kelce. So we know that there's something there. And, CEH for the 10 or 12 games you're going to have him, 10 to 14 games you're going to have him. There's that. But it is a little concerning this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a down year, but a down year by Patrick Mahomes standards is still a great year by literally half of the quarterbacks in this league, probably even more than that. So I don't think it's a dramatic down year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. There's a few less yards, maybe a few fewer touchdowns, but I'm not so certain that it's like, he will still finish top 5, but it may not just be as great of a year as what we saw last year, just because he is missing a few key components off of the previous years that he's been.
So I'm looking at this, and I think Patrick Mahomes actually has more yards than he did last year and more touchdowns than he did last year as well. Simply from the standpoint that I think Andy Reid went back to the drawing board a little bit this offseason and you will see them cook up some things that are different than what we've seen there. Because last year they kind of got figured out a little bit, as was already said. I think Kevin said it with the shell game and the cover 2 that they were playing heavily on that. I think that you'll see Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy have kind of reworked this offense a little bit, and see a bunch of new different wrinkles. The fact that they've got some different personnel there. I think that you see Patrick Mahomes spread the ball around more than what you've seen in the past, to the point where it was very easy in the past when you look at this Chiefs team, because you could pencil Travis Kelce in for anywhere between 22 and 25% of the target share, Tyreek between 22 and 25% of the target share, and then the other 6 or 7 guys just kind of got sprinkled in there, right? Like this year, I see a much more distributed target share. So it's this is one of those that you're going to have addition by subtraction, I do believe, and I know that probably brought up all sorts of questions there. So what other thoughts do we have on this one?
No, I can jump in on that, right? Like it, not that they didn't focus and really game plan, but it does. I think it makes everybody who was in the building last year and going into the building this year pay that much more attention, right? Like all the film study that they've had with these teams playing this cover 2 shell against them and having a whole off season to digest it and break it down and what worked and what didn't, and then coaching that up through your team and through your playbook. I think we will see some more success out of this. So I can subscribe to your train of thought, Derek, and I don't think it's very far-fetched at all.
So the JAC though did have was not on that same train. YouTube comment coming in saying more yards and more TDs without Tyreek. What are you smoking? LMFAO. Only the good stuff, my friend. Only the good stuff there. So another question coming in here. Does JuJu or MVS become a high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy? I don't believe so. I've got both of those finishing outside wide receiver 2 territory as far as my initial projections and initial rankings have it.
I tell you, JuJu's more likely.
Yes, he is much more likely.
I'd leave it at that. Like I could see it much more likely. I'll say yes to be contrarian, right? After I was just talking about him, I am liking him a bit more. And if you're believing this, right? If you're believing he's even knocking on the door, being able to draft him in the 7th round is a bargain, right?
Right.
Like so, and that's just part of it. It's just who do you like in that pocket, because it goes back to the guys who are around when you could be drafting CEH, right? JuJu's at the top in that bracket or that draft group with Sutton, St. Brown, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney. Like, depending on where you draft, you might have a crack at 2 of these guys if you're on one of the bookends. If you're in the middle, you kind of only have your crack at one of them, and you can pretty well expect that the rest of them are going to get picked off between your pick and then the following them that comes back 12 picks later. So JuJu has the best chance. I'd say wide receiver 2, yes, because it's the Chiefs offense. And if Mahomes is going to be throwing 38 touchdowns and 4,800 yards or something like that, then one of these receivers is going to have to break in and be wide receiver 2 plus to make that happen. Like, it can't just be Kelsey and then sprinkled in. So I will buy JuJu and say that's where I would at least give my stamp of approval.
I like it. Any other thoughts here on the Chiefs, on Patrick Mahomes, before we move on?
Real quick, do we think the Chiefs – I know the last couple of years they've been just head and shoulders going to win the West. Do we think that happens this year?
I don't know. It's head and shoulders. I think this division's extremely competitive. I think it's a
10-7, 11-6 winner.
Yeah, you take the homer bias out of it from each fan group,
sure,
and
sure,
us
sure,
included
sure.
as Bronco fans, right? But I truly think that you could make an argument for each of the 4 teams in the AFC West winning that division, and you can make an argument for each of those 4 teams being last in that division. Like, and all of them will have some really strong talking points and validity behind them. So, no, I think because of that, you can't just pick them to be head and shoulders. I have no problem with picking them, right? Like, you're the champ until someone knocks you off, essentially, right? You need one of the other three teams in that division to rise up and say, no more, and we are going to make you absolutely earn it and try and knock you off this pedestal. They haven't really been able to do it the last few seasons. I think this season is going to be a much harder fight for the Chiefs to remain on top than it has been in past seasons.
I will say what I do like about where the West is trending, the AFC West is trending, is it is now all gas, no brakes, right? Like, did I lose you guys?
Nope, you're going.
Oh, okay.
Gas and brakes.
It is all gas, no brakes when it comes to offense. Like it is going to be a fun division to watch because they've gotten all the defensive minds kind of out of there, right? And we've got young quarterbacks. Russ isn't young, but good quarterbacks. And it's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, I think that might be where I still give the Broncos the slight edge.
Yeah, because their defense is, one of the better, more established ones, right?
Right, and on paper, you should be able to say the Chargers. On paper,
right.
The problem with the Chargers is over the last decade, they have not been able to stay healthy. So you want to talk about trends? It is inevitable that some injury between Bosa and Derwin James and, pick a linebacker, that's coming across. Kenneth Murray, right, has yet to be right for the Chargers after they drafted him. They just are snake bit across the defensive side of the football. So if they can stay healthy, I think the Chargers probably give the Broncos a hell of a push for the best defense in that division, because on paper, I truly believe they are. It's the Chargers, not the Broncos. But Denver's had a way of, they're so used to being so reliant on their defense. I think that the nucleus of that defense is prepared for whatever comes at them. And now that they know they have offensive support behind them, I think that just camaraderie and team chemistry helps the Broncos more than what any other team defensively has in the AFC West.
I feel like in any AFC West division game, the over is generally not going, or the under is generally not going to be safe. The over will be a fine play.
Right. All right, a couple more questions, then we're going to head on into the Tennessee Titans here. One coming in here. Does a healthy Julio ever touch wide receivers 2 status for fantasy on the Bucs? Maybe on a week-to-week basis, but I'm not going to subscribe to that for season long.
Yeah, I don't see the consistent target share there for Julio. Now, I think he'll serve a nice purpose. He'll definitely be kind of a different type of security blanket because Gronk is gone and Julio is accustomed to going through the middle. I think you see a little bit more of that, trying to fill in that big-bodied, maybe shorter route. I could see Julio being Brady's go-to guy on like 3rd and short, especially when you're running out Godwin, Mike Evans, and Julio. It's a big group of receivers, guys. Like, we talk about how fast Miami is. Look at how freaking big Tampa Bay is. Like, and Tom Brady's accurate to begin with. So if you can get Julio, even the shell of Julio, right, and just being able to run routes at the professional level that he does and working on his craft, I think he'll find some success, but I don't know that you're going to see wide receiver 2 status out of it. Like, I think at the end of the season, if he finishes somewhere in the range of 30 to 32, you're pretty happy with where you're getting Julio, because that means he probably had 6 touchdowns, 750 yards, and 65 grabs. Like, I think you're pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now, but yeah, I've got Julio with 63 receptions, about 885 yards, and I've got him at 3 to 4 touchdowns, kind of in that range there. So you're talking where he will put up some fantasy for you and some fantasy value there, but it's going to be sparingly, and it's going to be kind of more of a stream type of option than necessarily a weekly starter. And I don't see it being a very consistent road for season long there either.
I like him both games against Atlanta.
Yep.
I mean, if we're picking this off and we're trying to break it, I like him both weeks against Atlanta. I like him week 1 against Dallas in a rematch of the showdown that was last year. And I'm sure there's 1 or 2 other games in there that he's going to just surprise people that I'm not quite thinking about, right? Just because he knows that division so well. But overall, I agree with Derek. He's a depth piece. Like, you're playing if Godwin can't come back right away, right? If he has a setback with the injury, Julio becomes more viable. But Julio, he's the third 3A and 3B in that offense if everybody's healthy. Like, I mean, I'm still taking Russell Gage over Julio just because I think Gage has the ability to get deep. And Julio is more of a possession-style receiver.
Exactly. Seattle is another one going through that schedule that I could see Julio uncorking on a week there. So, like, that's one of those that if I'm having to play him somewhere, like, I'm going to pick some matchups to try and cherry pick on that one. But
the home game against Carolina, right? Like, he's good. He's good for thrashing Carolina at least one game a year, or he was when he was in Atlanta. So there's your 4 or 5 games, right? Like it gets you a little over about a third of the season, just under a third of the season, where he's truly viable, and the rest of the time, it's you're flipping a coin, like with any third option.
I like it. Last question, then we're going to get into Tennessee here. Can you guys rationalize why people in my leagues are drafting CMC at 2 overall with his injury history? What am I missing?
So your train of thought is very much in line with our train of thought here on the show. Now, I'll tell you, people are drafting the upside, right? People are drafting the fact that, yes, he was dinged up, but if he stays healthy, his usage in the passing game alone puts him in top 10 running back territory. And then you add in the fact that he's also a running back and carrying the ball, kind of vaults him up there. So it's usage, times upside equals a number 2 ranking. It's not my cup of tea. It's not where I choose to draft Christian McCaffrey. I'll draft him at the back end of the first. Like, I'll take a flyer on him there. If people are, taking obviously Jonathan Taylor for redraft purposes, Derrick Henry, Najee, right? If those guys are gone, if Christian McCaffrey's there at 4, I'm going to have a really hard time passing him up. But then I'm going to have to go really running back heavy in my draft to make sure that I'm covered for the potential injury. That would be why they're taking him 2 overall.
It's the hope, right? It's the hope that, maybe this is the year where he doesn't get hurt. I mean, he hasn't proven it, but maybe this is the year he doesn't get hurt. And if he doesn't get hurt, what an advantage you have.
Just remember, you're injury prone until you're not. Like, that's kind of that is actually a thing out there in the NFL, right? You're injury prone until you're not. But would it surprise anybody if I told you that at the end of this season, Christian McCaffrey takes 261 rush attempts for just over 1,100 yards, roughly 10 touchdowns, 89 receptions on about 110 targets for about 700 yards and an additional 3 or 4 touchdowns through the air?
No. I think that's well within the possibilities if he's playing even 15 games, right? If he can play 15 games, I think that's well within the possibility and how Carolina is going to have to use him to stay relevant.
Right. And I think if he does that, that will put him in challenging for number 1 running back overall type of finish this season, right? Just that stat line I read off there, which we're all in agreement that he very well could do. And he doesn't even necessarily have to get 17 games in to try and do that, right? Like, if he plays 14 games, 13 games, that's still well within the possibility of that doing that. So that's a lot of the rationale right there, is the fact that he is a dynamic playmaker that has a high usage probability with the offense that he's in. And even in that stat line that I just read you, which would be a diminished stat line from where he traditionally trends towards the last few seasons, still puts him in the running for running back one territory. One of the other big reasons that you see players doing that and drafting him there is there are very, 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 very few players, namely Christian McCaffrey, that can get into the end zone 0 times in a game and finish running back 1 on a week, which we saw have happened multiple times over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think, and we touched on this briefly last week, and this will be my final thought on the matter, I guess, is when you're drafting overall, you have to manage your level of risk within your draft board, right? So if you're taking Christian McCaffrey, there is an X factor for level of risk that you need to associate with that. So you want to stay away from guys like Saquon Barkley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another guy who's been injured a lot the last couple seasons, right? You want to stay away from Alvin Kamara, legal troubles. You're not quite sure what's going to happen there. Even though he'll fall back to you and it'll look pretty, but you just have to manage that. So just be mindful, right? You don't want to have a team of all high risk players. That just very, very rarely works out. And the fantasy gods will just kind of have to align perfectly for that to truly work on your team. But if you draft McCaffrey and then you go fairly safe through the rest of the draft, just make sure you get your handcuff for him and move on, and you'll be okay.
By the way, for anybody wondering, the handcuff for Christian McCaffrey, it's Dante Foreman, not Chuba Hubbard. That's what I'm subscribing to.
I completely co-sign to that.
Alrighty. So JAC, I do see that you've got some more comments in there. You got one in there about the Broncos. We're going to get to that one, but we're going to go ahead and hit it into our next segment here of the Tennessee Titans, and we'll address the Broncos one after we get through the Tennessee Titans breakdown here. Alrighty, let's go ahead and head right in here to the Tennessee Titans, who finished 12-5 last year, 51% pass, 49% run. They were ranked 15th in total points for, 17th in total yards for. Head coach Mike Vrabel, offensive coordinator Todd Downing. And we're going to start with King Henry himself. Derrick Henry finished running back 16 last year, 219 rush attempts, 937 yards, 10 touchdowns, 18 receptions, 20 targets, 154 yards, 0 touchdowns. So the air thoughts on Derrick Henry.
I have a ton of shares of Derrick Henry. Like I do. He's starting to creep back up draft boards a little bit, right? But I took a ton of shares of him. I took a ton of shares in dynasty leagues too, just because I subscribe to the fact that I'm looking 2 or 3 years down the road. I don't give a crap to year 4, 5, and 6. Like there's just too much to try and figure out. So I don't see how his volume goes down, guys. Like I just don't. Like this Tennessee Titans team is not overly dynamic. Robert Woods is coming back from injury. No one really loves Ryan Tannehill. The way that this offensive line was built was to just plow the road and let Henry take the one guy, have him miss, and then go off to the races. So, did he rush it a little bit? And did he look a little sluggish in that playoff game? Yeah, he did. But also give credit to the defense, right? Like Cincinnati knew that that's what they had to stop to win that playoff game. And they sold the farm to try and stop Derrick Henry. Regular season football is played differently. So I'm all on the Derrick Henry train. I have zero problem taking him. He's climbing up. I'm starting to see him go as high as the 3rd running back overall, sometimes the 2nd in redraft leagues right now. So you're getting back in that territory. You got to take him in the middle of the 1st round if you plan on getting him. And then the sky's the limit, because one injury is not going to break him, right? He has been an Iron Man up to this point. There is no history of injury outside of what he sustained last year. And I think that he is just he's a freak of nature, and his work ethic is through the charts. So I fully subscribe to Derrick Henry this year.
It is a combination, right, of work ethic and a team that is built around Derrick Henry, because you can do that with Derrick Henry. You can build around a running back like him because he is a freak. So yeah, I mean, you're going to pay a premium, and if he stays healthy, you're going to get a premium return.
Agreed, right? He's coming off the board as, ADP running back 4, 4th overall type of thing in half-point PPR scoring. And I think that's probably pretty fair, probably pretty accurate of where he is. I've got him, right around about 1,600 yards from on the ground this year, that 13, 14 touchdown range. He will return value, and he'll be a very consistent workhorse back for you. I think that we see kind of more of the same from Derrick Henry this year. So I like him, and the guy's good at football. So let's go ahead and head on over to Hassan Haskins. JC also agrees that he's a top 4 for him in the league on drafting. All right, Hassan Haskins, the rookie drafted out of Michigan in round 4, pick 131. Thoughts on Hassan Haskins?
He's a grinder, right? He was a grinder at Michigan. I expect him to be a grinder in the pros. He's in a very good spot being able to learn behind Henry, right? He's not expected to do a whole lot this season. I think it's still kind of up in the air on who the true handcuff for Derrick Henry is. If you believe, you just want to hedge your bets a little bit because of the injury. Or the workload, if you will, if you think that he's not going to get quite as much work. But Haskins is a guy, I think you'll see him fall in the end zone a couple times this year. Like Henry can't play every single down. But aside from being a potential handcuff, I don't believe he has any standalone value this season. So unless I have Henry on my roster, I am not drafting Haskins, if that makes sense.
So last year we kind of got an idea of what the Titans look like without Derrick Henry, right? And that's not something that we had seen before. And they did give a little bit more to Ryan Tannehill, right? Like Tannehill was given a little bit more of a leash. They asked him to throw the football a little bit more than if Henry was in the lineup. So I don't have any reason to believe that would change. So for Haskins, I don't see him even he's not going to get the same usage as Henry if he's filling in for Henry, right? If for some god awful reason Henry gets hurt again, he's not going to get the same usage as Henry. So I just don't see him, and he's not. I mean, he's obviously not the same player as Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry is a one of one. So I don't know. I don't know that. To elaborate, I guess, on what Kevin was saying, I don't see him as standalone value really, and I'm not even sure I see him as handcuff value. But there is handcuff value there if you do have Derrick Henry, because you do want to make sure that you protect yourself, and it's easy to pick your running back's replacement than it is to try and find another one later on from a different team.
This is Hassan Haskins coming off the board, 67th running back overall, 209. That's going to put him as undrafted in the majority of leagues, right? Short of a very, very deep type of bench. At which point, that's where I'll leave him, even if I do have Derrick Henry. I just know that, if Derrick Henry goes down, I am going to have to spend a very, very large portion of my fab budget to go out there and pick him up and do that if I don't go the handcuff route. But that's probably the route that I would take on that one, because Tennessee, really the culture that they have there and the way that Vrabel likes to game plan is ground and pound, run the ball, and let his defense do the work there to try and win games and just slow the game down. So he does have some value, but certainly not standalone value there, I don't think. Let's see. So JC said he thinks that Hassan Haskins and Dontrell Hillard split carries. I think Haskins actually gets a little bit more of that workload than Hillard, but let's go ahead and head on over to the wide receiver room there. Robert Woods.
Hold on, we're not going to touch on Hilliard?
You want to touch on Hilliard? Let's go ahead and talk about Hilliard.
Touch on Hilliard.
I didn't have a slide.
I know we don't have a slide. I know we don't have a slide. So he was one of the guys who stepped up last year when Henry went down. So I'll kind of make it brief. But between Hilliard, Dante Foreman, who kind of stepped up into that, Foreman was able to kind of wrestle away lead back duties from Hilliard as the time went on without Derrick Henry. So I guess I think I see it opposite. Derrick, yes, splitting carries to some extent. I think Hilliard, just because of his familiarity with the offense and being in the league, I think he probably leans towards that a bit more. Now, same type of thing. Both of these guys, if Henry goes down, you're playing Russian roulette between the two guys. And in most cases, you're looking at running back 3 territory. Like, that's just ultimately what it is. They will cannibalize each other. But for the sake of handcuffs, you can kind of plant your flag on one or the other, depending on where we're at in the season, if you absolutely need it. So Hilliard probably a little bit better in the passing game than Haskins is. Hilliard's also probably going to have a little bit more early season repetition on the field, just again, because of the prowess, or not the prowess, but because of the familiarity with the offense. But overall, same position as Haskins. Like, you're drafting him for a handcuff. They have no standalone value. So if he's the guy you want, that's where you're taking him. But you're not drafting him just to have an extra running back on your roster. You're looking somewhere else.
Yes, I would agree with that. When I said that I see Haskins doing a little bit more of that work, like it's a 15 carry difference between that split there. And I think I have Haskins with right around 85 carries and Hilliard with somewhere in the like 60 to 70 range. Like that, it's going to be close on that one. So, all right, let's go ahead and head on over to the wide receiver room here. Robert Woods, wide receiver 48, 45 receptions, 69 targets, 556 yards, 4 touchdowns, 11.46% of the target share. Thoughts on Robert Woods?
Bobby Trees is a really good receiver. Like, he keeps flying under the radar, right? Like, he flew under the radar in Buffalo. Then he flew under the radar in LA for the most part because of the emergence of Cooper Kupp. And I think that story kind of continues. So as long as he's able to come back from this injury and be able to regain his route running ability, I think he's going to end up leading the team in targets and receptions. I don't know if the gap is very large, right? Like, we'll get into Burks here in just a second. So I don't know if that gap is huge, and I understand the appeal of drafting Burks, especially in dynasty leagues. But I do think instead of just having A.J. Brown, now you have pretty much 2 capable receivers. And so you're going to see that distribution spread out a little bit. And you have 2 guys that Tannehill can kind of trust instead of just one and then a bunch of guys. So I like Bobby Trees. I actually don't have too many shares of him because of where he's going in drafts. Like, I just always seem to find like that extra running back I want right around that same area as where Bobby Trees is going. But, if you're looking for wide receiver depth, I think this is about as sure of a pick in the 10th, 11th round in drafts as you could possibly get, because ultimately, as limited as this Tennessee Titans passing attack can be, I think Robert Woods is going to be, the 1A, if you will, to this passing attack.
I like Robert Woods. I think with where he's going, I think he finishes well above his ADP. Just because I think there is the experience, right? It's the experience that he has, and Tannehill will appreciate what he brings to the table. So I think of the options that Tannehill has, Robert Woods is, I think, the top one. So I like Robert Woods. I like where you can get him, and I like that. I think that he's going to just smash the return on his ADP.
I think he will outperform ADP. I don't know about smash on that one there, right? Like, Robert Woods is going to get probably somewhere around between 120, 130 targets. I think I have him right there at about 121, right around about 900 yards, 6 touchdowns when the season's all said and done, which is going to put him kind of in that fringe wide receiver 2 into wide receiver 3 territory there. So he will outperform that a little bit, right? The ADP on him has him as the 40th wide receiver coming off the board there. So I do think he returns value, and especially kind of where he's going, I do like him kind of over some of the other players that you can get in that range there, right? If I'm looking wide receiver, I'm going Christian Kirk. No, thank you. Russell Gage is actually pretty interesting in and around there, but at that point, I think I would still rather probably go with the Robert Woods, because I think he will have kind of the lead role here in Tennessee when it comes down to it. So, alrighty. Any other thoughts here on Robert Woods? Okay.
Nope, we're good.
All right. Treylon Burks, rookie, drafted first round, pick 18 out of the University of Arkansas. Thoughts on Treylon Burks?
I think he possesses a lot of the skill set that A.J. Brown did. I don't know if he's as polished as a pro prospect just yet, right? A.J. Brown's a freak of nature. So I don't know that you can expect Burks to step right in and fulfill everything that A.J. Brown was doing, which is why when we were talking about Woods, how I just mentioned, I do think that gets split up a little bit. That being said, I think Burks is good for 900 yards and 6 touchdowns his rookie season, right? Like, it's not out of this world good, but it is extremely serviceable. I think he kind of slots in right behind Robert Woods on most of these statistical categories and overall fantasy points. And because of where he's being drafted, I'm fading. If I'm going after one of them, or if I would rather have one of them, I would choose Woods, because my return on investment is greater than going 2, maybe 3 rounds higher for Burks in his rookie campaign. That being said, he's a good player. He was good at Arkansas. I think he's going to be a good pro. Like, it's not a knock. It's just, I typically fade rookie receivers. Like, it's just not my cup of tea. So I will take the proven veteran coming off of an injury for one season and see what Burks can turn into, and play with what I would consider a safer floor, than take the gamble a couple rounds higher and go that route, right? So Burks might have the higher upside because youth, because of his ability to truly stretch the field. Yes, but much like with McCaffrey, right? If I'm taking Christian McCaffrey, I'm more likely to take Robert Woods because it's a safer pick than Burks.
So I think for this year, Burks is a great, not great, but better best ball than he would be week in, week out, right? But that being said, I've said it on this show before, for younger guys, when the ball is sitting at the line of scrimmage, the further out you are from the ball, the easier it is to get on the field, because there's less responsibility on you individually in order to make a play happen. So it is a little bit easier for rookie wide receivers to get on the field. That's just to get on the field. It's not easy to develop chemistry with your quarterback and understand route concepts and trees and all that stuff. So I think that he's got the opportunity to get on the field. And another coaching cliche is your best ability is availability, and I think he'll be available. But I'm not so certain that he will be a week in, week out, great option. Just with how that roster is constructed, with how that offense works, like, it goes through Derrick Henry. So you're already talking about a limited number of passing attempts, let alone receptions that are going to happen. So Burks pretty good best ball, I think, for this year. And then, we'll have to see how things play out. So dynasty, yes, because I think he will eventually, assert himself. But redraft, maybe not so much. Best ball, probably worth, looking at.
Yeah, I'd say that you're probably right there. So when you look at it, right, like A.J. Brown and how the Tennessee offense really operated and worked, and why A.J. Brown put up such good finishes was the fact that A.J. Brown would explode for, one or two really long plays during a game for a touchdown and do that. He didn't get there as a volume receiver. Tennessee is not a volume type of passing attack. So, when you look at it and you break it down, right, Tennessee on average has averaged less than 30 pass attempts per game over the last season, which puts that below 500 total pass attempts on that one. So if we're looking at that, we say that Treylon Burks has a good target share of 22%. You're talking about him getting somewhere around 100 to 110 targets type of thing, which I think that you're going to see that produce about 900 yards, about 5 touchdowns. I've got him for 883 on the yardage, 5 touchdowns, 69 receptions, kind of in that range there. And I think that's probably about where he's going to finish. So, Treylon Burks, A.J. Brown built a little bit differently there as well, right? We saw Treylon Burks kind of run away from guys at the college level. And what we saw A.J. Brown do in Tennessee was catch the ball and either run away from guys or run through guys and get up the field and score on very long touchdowns. Some things that can certainly help him out is that Derrick Henry and that play action pass there. But again, I'm not necessarily looking to put Treylon Burks onto my roster with him coming off the board kind of where he is. He's kind of that 10th round type of pick, wide receiver 46 overall. So I think you guys hit it on the head that he'll be good, a season or so down the road, but this year not looking to take that shot on that one. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, wide receiver 64 last year, 38 receptions, 57 targets, 476 yards, 4 touchdowns, 10.9% target share. Thoughts on Nick?
He is going to stay on the waiver wire.
Yeah. No. Those are my thoughts. No.
Cosign. Just flat out hard pass on that one. All right. Moving on there. Austin Hooper came over in the offseason, finished tight end 24 last year, 61 targets, 38 receptions, 345 yards, 3 touchdowns, 12.22% target share in Cleveland last year. Thoughts on Austin Hooper?
I don't mind Hooper, but he's going to be he's one of the streaming tight end guys, right? Like if I'm really waiting on tight end, he's a possibility for that. But I know if I'm taking Hooper, I am also going to be always looking to upgrade. There's going to be some weeks where he'll put up a couple tight end 1 performances throughout the year, no question about it. But I think we're also going to see some games where he just disappears, right? And whether it's because of the running game or whether it's because the passing game just wasn't designed through him that week, whatever that is. So, he's a tight end that's going to end up on rosters throughout the year because I think he's a guy who's going to be added and dropped a lot just between your league mates as a bye week fill-in, as an injury fill-in, as a, maybe it's matchup dependent because you've been streaming tight ends all season long, something like that. But he's not a set it and forget it type player.
Yeah, stream Austin Hooper, which is sad because when he was with Atlanta, I desperately wanted him to be like, I thought that he would be that kind of second tier tight end, and it just never panned out. He just doesn't get the touchdowns that you need in order to get into that conversation. So I don't expect him. I mean, maybe with the threat of Derrick Henry, that might open up a few things down there in the red zone for him, but he played with really good running backs in Cleveland, and that wasn't really, he wasn't getting touchdowns there either. So I just don't know. He's streaming option, and that stinks because I thought for sure he would be one of those guys that would get into that. I wanted that to happen badly, but it just didn't.
Right. Yeah. Austin Hooper, very much what you just said there. I see him as a streaming tight end option there. Put up a couple of good weeks for you last year, but it came on the weeks that he scored touchdowns there. He's coming off the board, tight end 24, 211th overall. So undrafted in a majority of leagues out there, which is probably where he should stay. This year, I think I've got him right around about 550 yards and about 4 or 5 touchdowns. I think he'll slightly outperform his ADP, but again, you're talking tight end 21 on versus tight end 24 type of thing. So, not enough to really pull the trigger and move him up my draft board there. So, passing on Austin Hooper. Let's go ahead and head on into the quarterbacks here. Ryan Tannehill finished QB 12 last year. 357 completions, 531 attempts, 67.2% completion, 3,734 yards, 21 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 55 rush attempts, 270 yards, and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Thoughts on Ryan Tannehill?
The fact that he finished as quarterback 12.
I had to triple check that through a couple of different places because when I was making that, I didn't believe it.
Yeah, so I think it's possible again, especially if Henry stays healthy, right? Like where Tannehill kind of got his run 2 seasons ago was his ability to boot off of the play action because teams were so focused in on Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill actually had more rushing yards and more rushing touchdowns than Lamar Jackson. I mean, I remember talking about that, and everyone's kind of going, same type of thing. We're double, triple checking the stats. I think his passing numbers are better this year, right? I think that having Treylon Burks and Robert Woods, along with some of these other wide receivers who were younger last year, got some playing time because of Henry being down, A.J. Brown going down for a brief period of time, just kind of fighting through injuries last year a little bit. And Julio obviously disappearing because he got hurt, right? So it forced a lot of these players to step up. I like Tannehill as the second quarterback in Superflex leagues. Like, he's not my first choice, but if I get caught, right, like if I miss a run or something like that, like I feel okay, not great, but okay about the fact that, okay, I can pick up Tannehill and Zach Wilson, right? And I can stream between the two of them and on what I think, or Tannehill and Jones, and kind of go that route. So,
which Jones? Because that's a big Mac or Daniel.
Daniel, Max gone by then. So, he's not a sexy pick. Like he's just not. But seemingly, much like Kirk Cousins, always finds a way to push himself into that top end of QB2 to the bottom end of QB1. So there's some return there. It's not always the prettiest, and he's not a guy that I'm going after in single quarterback leagues by any stretch. But if you're in a super flex league, you can do worse. Like if the numbers show it. You can do much worse than taking Ryan Tannehill as your second quarterback in a super flex league, and you get him at a pretty damn good discount from where a lot of these, that second and third run of quarterbacks are. Because really right now, he's kind of in that fourth run. Like he's in that very bottom run of quarterbacks. A lot of people don't want any part of him because they think Malik Willis is going to end up taking over. All the noise around that at the moment. I'm not buying that for this season. So he's, again, not sexy, but he's extremely serviceable for where you're getting him.
So last year was the first time that he had more than 500 pass attempts. And keep in mind, he was on the outs there with Miami the last couple of years, and then was fighting with Mariota to get playing time in Tennessee his first year there. But it was the last time that he had over 500 pass attempts. And so the yards were there, and the touchdowns really weren't in terms of what he did the year previous when he was the starter in Tennessee, but the interceptions were way up. So if you can get the interceptions number to come down, the touchdown number to get closer to, he had 33 in 2020 and he had 21 last year. You can get that, you find that touchdown number to get closer to 25, 26. You bring the interceptions number down from 14 back to maybe 10, maybe, 9 in that range. Then that's a market improvement. Like that's a big improvement that you're talking there. And I could easily see that happening. The interceptions number comes down, the touchdown number goes up. I like Tannehill as the second quarterback in the super flex, like you said, Kevin. Certainly not your, nothing to hang your hat on in a single quarterback league. But yeah, you said the comp that I was going to make, and it's just like he seems to be like Kirk Cousins. I mean, Kirk Cousins gets more. I think Kirk Cousins gets more points just because of the, mop up duty and the fact that Kirk Cousins is incredibly accurate. Like it is phenomenal. Like just unbelievable how accurate Kirk Cousins is, because of his lack of risk. So I like Tannehill, second quarterback in a super flex. I feel like you get decent value there. Still feel like you can get a good return on where he's going. And there's not a ton of risk there. Like you're gonna get what you're gonna get out of Ryan Tannehill, week in and week out. Like you can pretty much just set it down. You're gonna get about 25, 28 pass attempts. Gonna get about 21, 22 completions. Probably get closer to around 200 yards, and he might mix in a touchdown or two. Like that's what you're getting.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. Like this is one of those, like I said, I had to check and go through a couple of different places just to make sure that that quarterback 12 finish last year was accurate, because I couldn't believe it when I was looking through that and typing that up. And I think you're right. I think you get more of the same this year, right? I've got him just below 3,700 yards, passing yards there. So a little bit less than what he did this last year, partly due to the fact that Derrick Henry being back and projecting Derrick Henry to play all season long. I think that actually swings the run pass ratio a little bit heavier towards the run this season. I do see him having a little bit of bounce back when you're talking touchdowns, so up to 24. And Ryan Tannehill seemingly finds a way to get into the end zone for 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns a year, which really is one of the big things that gives him a big floor when it comes to a running back position. I'm sorry, as a quarterback position there. And he also just completes a lot of passes, very accurate thrower of the football, and completes the attempts that he makes there. So certainly helps him out there as well. But do not see him being a big yardage guy, a big touchdown guy. A lot of folks look at this and think that 2 years ago when he had a 33 touchdowns in a season, that's more the Ryan Tannehill that they should expect, and that they think is going to be present. That season was the anomaly. That was not what you are to expect. That is the outlier there. When you look at it, his touchdown rate that season was almost 7%. So almost 7% of every pass he threw ends in a touchdown. The league average is closer to about 4%. Last year when he did that, it was a 3.9% on that one, and he had 21 touchdowns there. So that's more of what you're going to expect, is around that 24 touchdown mark. When it's all said and done, he's coming off the board, quarterback 22. I think he can return some value there, but I'm not necessarily pushing all in on that one. I think that you're going to see somewhere between a QB 14 and QB 18 finish this season for him. And that's kind of what I'm expecting there. So return some value, love him as a super flex kind of option.
I think it's reasonable to expect him to finish somewhere between what he did in 2020 and what he did in 2021. Like, I think that's who he is. I don't think he's that 33 touchdown guy. I don't think he's a 21 touchdown guy. 28 with the rushing touchdowns and 40 with the rushing touchdowns the year previous. But I think he's somewhere in between there, and that's good enough.
Right. I mean, if you can put up 30 total touchdowns as a quarterback, that'll certainly play well in the fantasy space for you. So, all righty. Guys, any other thoughts here on Ryan Tannehill or the Tennessee Titans?
No.
Do you think the Titans are the number 1 seed in the AFC this year?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, me either.
No, I think their defense is better than a lot of people are giving them credit for, though. But I don't think they're the number 1 seed. They drop too many silly games, right? And part of it's because when they get behind early, and we see this a couple games each year, when they get behind early, they really, really struggle to get back in the game because so much of their offense flows through Derrick Henry, that they do have a struggle adapting and changing game plan.
Yeah, when they get off script, it's not great.
No. Alrighty.
Nobody wanted to win the AFC last year, so like somebody had to. It just happened to be them.
Right. Alrighty. So before we get to final thoughts and head out, we did have that question come through earlier. We'll go ahead and hit that up now. So JAC over at YouTube asking, a lot of people are drafting Cortland Sutton as a wide receiver too. How is that possible considering Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, Javonte, and Fant aren't going anywhere? Tim Patrick went down with an ACL earlier today, and Noah Fant got traded off to Seattle. So you're dealing with Jeudy and Javonte, KJ Hamler, and Albert Okwuegbunam.
And don't forget, Cortland Sutton was a beast before he got hurt that year.
Well, and not even that. So Russell Wilson is widely regarded as one of, if not the best deep ball thrower in the game, right? Like he throws this high arcing, beautiful deep ball, and at its apex, the nose just turns down. Like he just has that ability. The nose drops down and just falls right into receivers. Cortland Sutton and mostly Teddy Bridgewater, there were, I think, one, maybe two opportunities with Drew Lock. They were 2 yards off constantly. 2 yards off. If he connects on 2 or 3 of those 8 plays, right, we're looking at a completely different stat line for Cortland Sutton coming into this season. So I just, being here, right, as you guys are kind of listening to the beat writers that we know and trust on top of some of the other outlets, I think Sutton's the clear one on this team. Like, it's not Jerry Jeudy yet. Jeudy still has an issue with the drops. Jeudy needs to show that he can stay healthy himself, as he's been nicked up the last couple seasons. I think Russ makes everybody better, but when it's all said and done with, I really, really like the fact of having Cortland Sutton as my wide receiver 2, or in some cases my wide receiver 3, and just bolstering the hell out of that position group for me, because I think Sutton finishes in the top 15. Like we saw Lockett finish inside the top 15. We've seen DK finish inside the top 15. We've seen them do it together, all with Russell Wilson. And I'd argue that this Broncos offensive line is better than anything that Seattle ever put in front of Russell Wilson, maybe outside of the Super Bowl year. Like so it just is one of those situations where I think people are fading Cortland Sutton a little bit too much. And I would have, if I'm down to it and I really think that someone is going to pick him away from me, I'll take him around earlier than where his ADP is and grab him in the 6th instead of waiting until the 7th. So I guess that's where I'm kind of buying into that. Albert O is, honestly, by the end of the season, I think he's a non-factor. I think you're going to be hearing more about Greg Dulcich than you are Albert O come the end of the season. Judy's definitely going to find a way to get his. I am not going to be surprised if he finishes, wide receiver 20, maybe a little bit better, because this Broncos passing attack coming this season. And with Javonte, I still think they're splitting carries, man. Like, everybody wants Javonte to be the guy, but I really think that him and Melvin Gordon are going to be split up. Like, you'll see Javonte take more. Like last year, it was almost dead nuts even, right? A true 50-50 split between the two. I think this year you see Javonte, he might end up with 55, 45-45, 50, 57-43, something like that. But Javonte, they're not taking the reins off of him yet because they want to preserve him. They want to keep the kid. They want to be able to get that second contract on him and have him for longer than that 4-year shelf life of an NFL running back. And I think you'll see that this year.
And I think Melvin Gordon, well, you're right. I think Javonte gets a lot more work from 20 to 20. I think Melvin Gordon's going to see more goal line work on when it's all said and done there. Javonte will certainly still get in there and get touchdowns, but
yeah, the only thing that'll change that is if one of the two of them starts dropping the ball, right, put the ball on the ground, then you'll see the other one kind of take over some of that goal line stuff, because red zone turnovers have plagued the Broncos over the last couple seasons, and I don't see Nathaniel Hackett being very forgiving about those. So I think that's one of the things that could alter that, but it's hard to predict turnovers, right, guys? Like, I mean, there's no way of saying, yeah, Melvin Gordon's going to have 3 fumbles inside the 10 and he's going to get yanked. Like, there's nothing that says that. So, yeah, you might see Gordon with more touchdowns. I mean, to the tune of Gordon might see 9, 10 even possibly, and Javonte might sit at 6 or 7. And that's just going to how it be. And then the yardage kind of balances things out.
Yep, that's kind of how I see that one as well. So, alrighty, guys. Well, I do believe that's going to take us down here to the actually, let's see what this one is that just came in here. So, completely forgot Fant went to Seattle. Patrick is out for the season. Skeptical on Sutton the same way I am with CMC. I know he has ability and skill as a top-end wide receiver too, but injury-prone. Yeah, again, right? Like, we've already kind of said that you're injury-prone until you're not, right? Like, there's a lot of cases out there where you see guys. Matt Stafford, with his back early in his career, was injury-prone and had that label tossed on him, and then it's kind of become an Iron Man sense. Like, you're injury-prone until you're not, right? And same thing, you're an Iron Man until you're not in this game. It's a rough and physical game. So we'll see how that one goes. But I don't know that you need to do that.
Sutton played every game last year, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he came back. He maybe was not as crisp as we liked for him to be, and he fought through some injuries last year. But he was on the field. So
and he had nobody throwing to him last year.
Well, and that's true too. But as far as being available, right? The cliche. Best ability is availability. He was on the field. Like, maybe didn't make the best of his opportunities, but he wasn't on the DNP list a whole lot.
And the only games that Cortland Sutton has missed his entire pro career in 4 seasons came after he tore his ACL in week 1 of the 2020 season, right? Like, week 2. You're right. Week 2. So, he has played every game out there, and ACLs are one of those that they're typically in that, they take a little bit longer to come back from than some of these other ones. But typically you're talking about a year out before you really start seeing guys kind of turn the corner on that one and go through it. And I think you will see Cortland Sutton have a bounce back year this year, and Russell Wilson only helps that. So, alrighty. Any other thoughts out there? Any final thoughts? We're going to go ahead and wrap this guy up.
No, stay tuned, right? We'll keep bringing everybody the latest and greatest. Enjoy draft season. Feel free to hit us up as you're in the middle of drafts and have any questions. We love answering questions and trying to give, our perspective on it. Maybe it's the same as yours and affirmation, or maybe it's contrarian and it just gives you something to chew on. But this is my favorite time of year, right? Like, we get into this and the team breakdowns are fun, but truly getting into drafts and draft strategy and building a team is where my kind of passion is with this fantasy football sector. So this time of year is like Christmas every day for me. I can't get enough of drafts right now, and joining probably far too many. I'm trying to get into more best balls so I don't have to worry about lineups. Like, that's my goal now. Like, I want to do all the drafting, so I'm trying to get into a lot of best balls right now and leave the season long and dynasty stuff where it's at. I don't know if I need any more of those.
Hey, speaking of joining a league, Derek, we put it out. We've gotten some people already involved in it, in the new Good Old Boys. I did the promo for it last week, and I can't remember what we settled on the name for it.
The Scramble Eliminator.
Scramble Eliminator. Thank you so much. The Good Old Boys Scramble Eliminator. If you guys are looking to get into a kind of a different way of playing fantasy football, it's unique in that you can join up with a couple buddies, or you can lone wolf it. It's got the combination. We've made the combination of like a scramble golf tournament, if you've ever played in one of those, where you can take kind of the best of your team, you can use that as your option. And it's got the fun of a guillotine league where teams get eliminated, players go back into the available player pool, and you move on. And this one's really fun because it's a blind auction, which I've never done before, and I'm really excited to participate in something like that. So we've got the link right now in the comments if you want to join in on it. You can check out our Twitter for some more rules as to how the league works, and you can get in and test your skills against us. It's okay to lone wolf it. I did it last year, made it really far, almost won the dang thing. But it's also fun to get together with a couple buddies. It's teams of 3, correct? You do teams of 3 where you can trade within, your little team of 3, your little pod of 3, and put together the best team to avoid elimination week in and week out. So head on over to the website. That we've got the link right there. Check out the Twitter handle. I know we've got a sign up there, and I'm sure we've got it on all the rest of the socials as well, of which Derek is about to hit you with all of that information.
There you go. Guys, so that's going to bring us down to the end of it. Make sure that you're hitting up our socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. Again, one of the best ways to support this independent podcast is to head over to YouTube, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. And we go through and we break down these guys and go player by player, player profiles, all of that kind of stuff. And we take all of those and we chop them up into little bite-sized type of info bits for you, so that when you're sitting there and it's coming back to you in the middle of your draft, things like that, and you're going, man, I don't know between this guy, you can take a look at what the Good Old Boys have to say on that one, and help you make your draft selection for those cash and trophies out there. So head over to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button. We've got between 3 and 6 videos a day between now and about Labor Day dropping on those player profiles. Plus, we've got all the shows coming at you live Tuesdays, 11 p.m. Eastern. When we get back into the season, we're going to go 3 shows a week, doing that Tuesday night, that Friday night for you, and then that Sunday morning, helping you get your lineup set. But that's going to do it for us. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.